So everything is moving along real nice on your home purchase, and then all of a sudden, your home appraisal comes in lower than the contract price. Well, what do you do now? Is it time to panic? No, probably not. We'll get into it right after this. Stay tuned. What's going on, everybody? This is Robert Hayes, and along with my wife Christie, we are the Hayes Home Group right here in Grand Junction, Colorado. And if you are brand spanking new to this channel and you want to know everything about working, living, playing here in Grand Junction, do yourself a favor and start now by hitting that subscribe button. Tap that little bell, that way you're notified every time we post a new video. If you're even thinking about moving to and living here in Grand Junction, reach out and give us a phone call, text message, email, whatever you need to do to get a hold of us. We've got your back when moving to Grand Junction. Alright, so in this video, we wanted to talk a little bit about what happens when you're going through that process of purchasing a home. You've agreed on a purchase price, you've gone through the inspection, there's no objections, there's no leaky toilets or leaky faucets, you're beyond that phase. Now it's time to get the home appraisal. Now, we're not talking about the assessment value on the property, we're talking about an actual licensed appraiser who goes out to appraise the home and make sure that the value supports what the contract price is. What happens when that appraisal comes in lower? Well, it all depends on really if you're the buyer or the seller. It could be really good news, not so good news. So I wanted to talk a little bit about both sides. Now, you're coming from out of state most likely, so really we want to focus a lot here on the buyer side, but there's certainly some impact on the seller side as well. So it's a little bit different than, let's say, buying something on Craigslist for $100, then you find out later that what you bought was actually only worth 70 bucks. Well, you're stuck. You paid 30 bucks more than what it's probably worth. Well, in real estate, on the purchase contract for the buyer, you actually have that option to renegotiate with the seller and decide whether or not they're willing to, they being the seller, willing to come down to that appraised value. And if you and the seller can't come to an agreement on the renegotiation process, then you as the buyer can walk away and you get your earnest money back. So you're certainly not stuck at that higher contract price. Now, the reason why there are these safeguards involved is because there's a lender involved, and that lender also wants to make sure that they're protecting their interest as well with a loan that they're providing on the property. Now, the purchase price has been established on the contract, so if the appraisal comes in lower than that, the lender is going to lend on that dollar amount that the appraisal came in at, not the price on the contract. So they're looking to protect their interest as well. So to make sure that they're covered as well, the lender is going to then go and hire an appraiser to go out and appraise the property. So if the property doesn't appraise for the contract price, then the lender at that point is going to say, whoa, hold the phone. We've agreed to lend on X amount. That's what it says on the contract. Our appraiser says differently. So it really is a protection for them and also a protection for you as the buyer as well. All right, let's take a look at some of your options as the buyer if the appraised value comes in lower than the original agreed upon purchase price. So let's say, for instance, that the original contract price was $250,000 and the appraisal comes in at $240,000. Well, at that point, you really have three options. All right, well, the first thing that you can do is simply ask the seller to drop the sales price to what the appraised value is. Pretty simple. Mr. or Mrs. Seller, the appraisal came in at $240,000. The original contract price was $250,000. You need to come down to $240,000 or we're walking away. It's as simple as that. The second option that you have is to simply pay the difference. Let's say that you know this is a high demand area and this house is, if it hits the market again, is going to probably get multiple offers again, or potentially you're going to lose out on the property if you don't do something right now. You can certainly pay the difference. You love the house, it's your dream home, you know you're probably not going to find another one, and you want to pay that extra $10,000 in cash. You can certainly do that. That's option number two. Option number three is to come to some sort of mutual agreement with the seller. Let's say, for instance, originally the seller was going to pay concessions for closing costs, and that was going to be about $5,000 that they were going to give to you in the closing. So now you've got a $250,000 property on the original contract that the seller was going to net $245,000 essentially, because they were giving you $5,000 in concessions. So you can agree to do something like that and say, look, we'll pay $5,000 $1,000 over the original 240 appraised value, but we're not going to pay $10,000 over, something along those lines. So there's always ways to figure out a mutual beneficial agreement if that's what you want to do. And that's really when you want to talk to your trusted real estate advisor. That's us in this case. We'll let you know, based on market conditions and many other factors, which one of those three options is probably going to make the best sense for you as our client. Now keep in mind, if you cannot find an option, any one of those three, to come to a conclusion, then you as the buyer, you certainly will lose that appraisal cost that you paid up front, any inspection costs that you've had up to that point. So you really want to get to at least a point where one of those three options is a viable option for you as the buyer. Do I want to pay the difference in the purchase price from the appraised value? Do I want to just simply ask the seller to come down to the appraised value? And number three, do I want to come to some sort of mutual agreement with the seller? For instance, there was items that you were asking for as far as getting particular on a closing date, and the seller originally wasn't agreeable to that, but they conceded and made that concession for you. Maybe you remove that. Or again, there was a laundry list of inspection items that you were asking the seller to do. Maybe you concede on a few of those and you get to some sort of middle ground. So again, there's always a way to get through that process if the appraisal does come in lower than the original contract price. Now, from the seller's side of things, let's take a look at how things look from their perspective. So you certainly can, as the seller, tell the buyers, look, the appraisal came in lower. I don't care. We agreed to $250,000. We're sticking to our guns. Take it or leave it. Now, if the buyer elects to leave it, really as the seller, you need to look at a couple of factors. So if you're going to choose this path as the seller, you want to understand what kind of loan the buyer is pursuing. So if it was a VA loan, then a VA certified appraiser is going to be inspecting the property on an appraisal. If it's an FHA buyer, they're getting an FHA loan, and a certified FHA appraiser is going to go out and appraise the property. If it's a conventional loan, then a conventional appraisal is going to be done on the property. How that can come into play is if a new buyer, let's say that the buyer walks and a new buyer comes into play and they are getting an FHA loan, that FHA appraisal is going to follow your property for 6 months. And so at that point, you want to understand that, you could be waiting for 2, 3, 4 months to actually get someone to agree to pay the higher purchase price, even though the appraisal came in lower. A bird in the hand, right? Time is money, and is it really worth not dropping the sales price to the agreed upon appraised value? Or you want to wait for that cash buyer for 3, 4, 5 months? All depends. Typically that doesn't work out well. You want to at least try to come to some sort of a mutual agreement with the buyer. Now, the other thing that you can do as the seller is you can dispute the appraised value. We've seen this tried before. I would say the success rate really truly is about 5% of the time. So you and your trusted real estate advisor will then put together and compile a list of maybe some data that you feel the appraiser didn't use to evaluate the final appraised value of the property. So maybe there's a comparable sale that's perfect and a great match to be used as an analysis for the appraised value, and the appraiser excluded that for whatever reason. Maybe they forgot it, maybe they didn't see it, but you can certainly take that chance to see if the appraiser will agree with the data you've submitted on an appraisal dispute. Oftentimes, again, 90-95% of the time, you're really not going to see that value go up. It'll probably stay the same. So is that worth it? Time is money once again to go through that entire process. All right, so there you go. Those are both sides of the coin. As the buyer, again, 3 options. Ask the seller to reduce the purchase price to what the appraisal came in at. You can certainly pay the difference in cash. Number 3, and probably the best one, is to come to some sort of mutual equitable agreement with the seller if the seller doesn't want to drop the price to what the appraised value is. But usually 99% of the time, both parties can come together to an agreement and move that contract to closing. Again, if you are new to this channel and you like this information and you want to know everything about working, living, playing in Grand Junction, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, tap that little bell, that way you're notified every time we post a new video. And if you're even thinking about moving here to Grand Junction, reach out and give us a phone call, shoot us a text, an email, comment below, whatever you need to do. We've got your back when moving to Grand Junction. Until the next video, we'll catch you later.